And a good spiritual morning to you once again. I'm Father Cosmas. Thanks for joining me today for a quick chat and our morning cup of coffee. And October 1st is coming, the end of the week, and every year on October 1st we celebrate St. Romanos the Melodist, known for writing beautiful hymns and performing beautiful hymns in the church services. So it got me thinking about our worship and our church services, because that's our most fundamental experience of church, at least it should be. And people often say, Father, I don't feel like I'm getting enough out of worship. You know, how can I get more out of coming to church on Sunday and getting more out of the services? So a couple of things. First and foremost, you know, you kind of have to be there. Don't tell anybody, but it helps if you show up. It helps if you actually are there to get something out of the services. Now, I know a lot of people are participating still virtually, and because they have legitimate concerns, either they're homebound or they're in facilities having care, or they have legitimate health concerns because of COVID. And so if you have those legitimate concerns, you know what, it's better than nothing. It's better than the alternative. Please watch online. At least you're benefiting, of course, as much as you are able. There are, however, some people taking advantage of the situation and saying, well, I'm still a little afraid of COVID, so I'm just going to keep staying home. Okay, and you'll have to judge whether or not that's legitimate or not legitimate. The main point, remember, of the liturgy is receiving the body and blood of Christ. It's communion. And last time I checked, Amazon doesn't ship that. You can't get communion through Prime. So you need to come to church. You need to be able to receive communion. So the first step is physically being there, right? At least to try to participate in the services. And if you really want to get something out of the services, you have to put something in. You have to engage. You have to participate. People sort of expect to just come to church and stand there or sit there periodically, and for 40 minutes, half an hour, however long they've made it for, and somehow through osmosis they're just going to absorb Christ from the air and they'll be fine. And then they're sort of baffled why they're not getting more out of worship. Well, because you're not putting anything into the worship. There's a book right in front of you. When was the last time you picked it up and followed along? No one's going to judge you and think, wow, they don't know the service because they're looking at the book. It's okay to follow along. And even if you don't need the book, but you know everything by memory, great. Sing it, say it out loud. For most people, they're coming and standing there in absolute silence until it comes time for the creed. Then they say, I believe in one God, for a few seconds. Then the time for the Lord's Prayer, and they say the Patrimon, our Father who art in heaven. But the rest of the time is absolute silence. And that's really not the way the services are designed. They're designed for us to participate. It's a dialogue between the priest and the people. And we shouldn't allow the choir or the chanters sort of to be our proxy and take away our role. They're there to lead us. They're there to help us and support us, not supplant us. So follow along. Read along with the prayers. You don't have to read the prayers out loud because that's my part. That's the priest's part. But you can read them silently and follow along with them. The parts that are for the people, sing out loud. Sing along with the choir. It's okay to do that. And when you do that, you'll notice two things that will happen, and I'll finish with this. One, and don't tell anyone, the services will go by very, very fast, a lot quicker than they are for you now, than just trying to sit there in silence, staring at the walls and the icons and just hoping that the service goes by. When you've got the book and you're following along with the hymns, you'll notice the service will go by a lot faster, number one. Number two, and more importantly, you're going to get more out of the service. You're going to be plugged into the content of the service because we're there to pray those hymns. We're there to pray those prayers. How can you do it without saying it? It's like telling a child, hey, you know what? We want you to learn the Lord's Prayer, but just in your head. We don't want to hear you say it. We just want you to learn it mentally. It's just mental prayer. It's meditative and contemplative prayer. You can do that, right? No, they can't. They have to say it. They have to verbalize it. And it's the same thing for us. It's okay to say those prayers. We want to sing along, especially with the ones that we know very well or our favorites. And then we have those beautiful hymns and those beautiful words sort of, rolling around in our minds, finding their way, creeping into our hearts and making us feel good. And we have a good feeling that we're engaged in worship. And then guess what? We want that good feeling next week and next week. And then before you know it, worship isn't as much of a struggle to get to once a month. We find ourselves going a little bit more on a weekly basis. And then before you know it, we're receiving God's blessings each and every day. Amen.